So we're in part two talking about early Christian forgeries. Remember, I will keep this under 5 minutes, and you can push the little ×2 thing if that helps you get through it faster. Now, when we're talking about this, we have to remember the ancients knew about forgeries. They were not ignorant, and they use a lot of same methods that we use today. They just didn't have like the chemical analysis baseline, and they didn't have as much nuance as we know about it now. But with that, they very often knew that everyone was forging. They knew they were forging. They knew that other people were forging because they knew nobody had these documents. And so what they were doing is they very often would make sure that they would put something in there like an incantation or invocation that says like, upon pain of death, no one should change this, or God will strike down those who would change this document, right? Makes it sound really important, like this is ultimately holy scripture, that nobody would absolutely violate that. They did that because that makes it seem to the average person that this would be more legitimate. And then what they would do is they would look to each other and kind of have these like back and forth hissy fits with each other about who was legitimate. And so they'd be like, your stuff is forgery. And they knew that theirs was forgery too, but calling out people makes for a great political entertainment, essentially. And it makes the person who's doing the call out seem better. Now, this parallels a lot to modern social media, so be aware of that fact. When these individuals were looking to gain power, what they did was start calling out these other groups for the forgeries they had. They knew what they had was forgery too, but what they would do is take these other groups they saw as a threat and show the people, see, this is why it's wrong. This is how it's bad. And they would just like paper letter after letter after letter about how awful and how bad this is and how much this doesn't actually align with the goodness in the world and the way the truth actually is revealed to them. And then they would use their documents as proof, and they would have things like those invocations in the beginning to show, see, this is the truth. We know this. We are the ones who are upholding and protecting this. And typically because they were more Roman, the proto-orthodoxy were accepted, and it became a grand kind of spectacle for them to constantly paper these other groups over. Like, it became that kind of narrative where the proto-orthodoxy was fundamentally more Roman. It became an attractive baseline for higher level Romans because they were upholding all of the Roman standards already. And this also became a thing because the ones that were fundamentally anti-Roman structure were poorer. They had less literacy. They had less baseline, so they were not able to forge as effectively as well. And so we end up with a kind of classist baseline. Those who were forging for these groups could easily be ripped apart by these higher echelon, more educated, more literate individuals and say, see, look at this pathetic attempt to do this. See, we have true knowledge here. And they could use the elitism to essentially leverage their baseline and break off and kill other cults, essentially. And because they were more Roman, they're more accepted. They use this prestige of calling out these other groups, and fundamentally they end up creating a path by which they are more accepted in society as these kinds of like, look at us for being so wonderful in society by calling out these terrible people. And really, nobody was looking at their shit closer. Nobody took a second look because it was already so Roman, because it was already part of the same systems that they accepted. And because they were already part of this, it was easy to look down on the people that they already looked down on. It was easy to dismiss the people they would already dismiss anyways. And fundamentally, that's what we end up with. The people who became the orthodoxy were so Roman, were so aligned with this kind of Roman ideology that they typically were not looking at those things closer. They were not looking over their own forgeries in a way that would identify them as such, because they matched. Why would you question it? And we have to remember that in that we moved from an idea of these letters being just information and not being seen as holy scripture to, after the establishment of the orthodoxy, those things very much becoming more of a holy thing that is now upheld as part of this canonical Bible, right? They were not originally viewed as such, but definitely became that over time as the proto-orthodoxy continued to elevate these things as above us, as things that were uniquely written and uniquely divinely inspired, right? And so that's how we end up with a lot of the change and shift in narrative of these from letters to actual scripture.